I've read recently on LinkedIn why you should outsource HR.
So for me, that's a quite standardized cross-functional or cross-industry function, which is never the core of a company. It's a core of the rules potentially, but at the end it's nearly the same in each industry. And therefore, why should you care for and develop that knowledge more and more in your own company? It's very difficult to get the right sources, the right resources in there, the right technology. So that's the main reason why to outsource. So to give it to someone who knows it better than yourself.
It's a conceptual misunderstanding of the role of personnel department, HR department. Somebody who cares of the soul of the employees are those who bring the business added value. And historically, it was pushed somehow to HR department, which is originally just HR admin. And if we are talking about outsourcing of HR, everyone says like, but how come I had somebody next to my door. If I had problems, I go to talk to this person, and now it's outsourced. I need to pick up the phone, open the ticket. Yeah, but I mean, we don't outsource the morals, but we outsource the administrative, transactional function. The role of support still has to stay with the organization, but the question was it has to stay with HR.
Correct. So I think
it has to go to line manager or to somebody who is within the organization who so it's more about the like kind of defining what is the role of HR in general. And as soon as you define it, then you can understand what kind of part you can outsource.
Yeah, so for me, the big game changer was in the thinking that 20 years ago, the HR department was the watcher of the rules. So they had the responsibility to check every process at the end, if the process was correct, if the payments are correct, if the bonus calculation was correct. And that is something what the managers of old style, they lived that forever. So they made a calculation, they throw it over the fence, and they thought there's someone in the back.
I don't care somehow. So there is somebody in the end of the process who will remind me.
They should look in our tariff agreement if that is right or not. If the bonus is not on top of above of the what we are allowed to do, and that's for me that completely changed with the intelligence you could nowadays put into the cloud solutions. So for me, it's just you have to put the right rules into where the data and where the process starts. So at the end, an outsourcer like we are, for example, we are just processing what is coming in. So we are not anymore the ones at the end of the process telling the customer that's not right. You have to make sure that a data which is coming comes through the cloud in the right manner, in the right matter, and in the boundaries what is allowed. And then you just can take it, and you are as a service provider responsible to do it right, what you get, to process it through and manage it, but not originate or check the originated data. So that's something where you push the responsibility back to the customer. You give the right tools, you give the right descriptions, you give the right information so that everyone is part of the process, and that's working. But that's changed with a generation of managers, digital people who really understand that is good.
And this is, I think, the biggest misunderstanding, you're absolutely right, how outsourcing works. And if I think of actually whether the outsourcing project is successful or not successful, this is, you can see it probably in every project. If customer thinks, okay, I have implementation partner, outsourcing partner, and he does everything for me. This is not the case. I still have built up on the customer side, governance, know-how, steering organization. I still need to check quality. So it works, it runs. It will never work alone without just, I push it outside, throw it over the fence, like you said. It never will work out. This is like, I think, a crucial misunderstanding. So they need to have something inside, the customers need to have something inside the organization still to manage and to steer the provider.
I'll give you a nice example of one of our quite big customers at the moment. that I'm always saying that's this BPO or outsourcing 1.0. So they more or less gave us a few years ago the complete HR, admin and payroll department, and we, or the people working there, were responsible, for example, for the bonus calculation and really to find out if and how the bonus works. I said, we can't take, I'm telling to the people now, we can't take the responsibility for that. So if the customer wants a Christmas, whatever money, a Christmas bonus, we gave the information they need to take a decision, to make the calculation, and they're coming back with the final amounts. And that is something a lot of customers, they don't understand. They can't push this responsibility to a service provider. That's not possible, because also we are, of course, having churn rates and whatever. So these responsibilities are with HR. So we are not at the end, we can't take decisions on behalf of. So that's something which is misunderstanding in a lot of outsourcing discussions you have, where they think that you are also taking decisions for things starting in the process at the beginning, and that's not correct. That's something a lot of customers are expecting, but they will not get it. They will not get it with any of the service providers in the markets. So we had some recent RFPs or bids we were working with, where customers just used the old service catalog they, for example, used 20 years ago, which exactly where everything was on behalf of their own HR department. That's something they have written down, and they are putting that into an RFP process, for example. And then that comes to someone at the service provider side, and you can't take that responsibility. You can't really take the old structure, because you have new tech in, a new tech stack, if you would set it up new. And that is something which is a big mistake in sourcing a provider, for example. You're not using new service catalog, you're not listening what the providers are coming with, because they know some things better than the customers, because they have multiple customers. They are working like factories. So you're asking to get a 100% good product, but not your old product. You're not asking Audi to build a Mercedes. So Audi will provide an Audi, and that is something what some customers don't understand. It's also one of the biggest mistakes. They're not reading in the negotiations really what they sign.
But it sounds like everything is customer's fault. I mean,
no.
Not the case. I mean, it's also, your responsibility, or let's say also ours as our small consulting team. To enable the customer to bring this knowledge, because these things, you cannot learn them in the university. You need to do a couple of times to understand why HR operations do not work, why a shared service center does not work, and what you need to do in order to enable it. I think this is the key. And this is, I think, a crucial point. One of the things why people are disappointed with the outsourcing product is that the expectations were different, or they didn't get the support in the beginning, or provider didn't explain it correctly, didn't point out things. Okay, please watch out here. This can be pitfall here. This can be mistake here. Think of this. Think of that. Sometimes provider also driven to sell. So.
There are cases, yes. but seriously, just recent example. We are a year in a product. We are short before go live, and now it's 3 weeks for go live. The customer realized that they bought a managed payroll services. So that means industry standard, the customer is responsible for data entry. So they didn't read the catalog, service catalog, which clearly said data entry is on behalf of the customer. And now they haven't planned really to do so, because they were so in a hurry in the signing process that they have not really checked everything in detail. Of course, as a provider can also take over that role, but we have to plan as a provider if we need people with hands doing that. And now they realize that they have not contracted that, and now we are in a.
But wasn't it your kind of Because you don't want to have the situation in the end shortly before go live. I mean, isn't it like a bit your task to remind of that or point out this topic? Yeah. Or you maybe missed yourself too. I mean, I don't know. You take it by default that there is a contract, everything is written, they need to read carefully.
Well, that's something I think where people like you and your company are coming in, also taking part in these workshops, bringing the knowledge in, and just if you are doing the design of the process design or the future process design, then you're really talking about who is doing what. That is a technology, that is a process. And then it quite quick comes to the point that the customer or people responsible at the customer side realize, oh, shit, we have to do these and these steps. And if the customer is not educated enough or is doing it by themselves or not putting the right people with the right empowerment in such processes, they will not realize it. Customers and people at the customer side are not doing that day by day. And sometimes your consultants are also not really bringing it at that point so at the table, because it's always a discussion, of course. That's you're right. So it's more fault of the provider that you don't put that topic on the table.
In the end, it makes your life difficult, yeah?
Of course.
Because, I mean, your provider basically earns money not with rolling out, but with operations, and you are more interested to bring operations as soon as possible alive, yeah? And every delay costs you money, and in the end, costs the customer.
Of course.
So.
So if you think more or less if we are interested in having a lot of people working for the customers or a lot of human beings doing transactions, that's not our goal. So our goal is to create a solution with the customer which is more or less hands-free working. So our idea is to have hands-free processes and not having 1,000 people sitting in Krakow or in Spain doing transactional work. So the dream is, if you are a service provider, that you have an empty factory with not too many people doing intelligent things in systems, but not doing really handy work. So if you have to take a form which is digitalized once and you're typing that in, that's a bloody idiotical process. So why should you do that? Look and discuss with the customer, and that's part of our interaction if you are on the customer side, really to educate the customer that it's nothing bad, that we are doing less handy work. We're putting more intelligence. We are responsible that this process works seamless and good, but we are not responsible in putting a lot of people behind. Of course, we have people for things where we don't have solutions, but all in all, we are interested in working the same process like 10, 15 years ago by hand, by automation, by robotics, by the cloud solutions. So we put more and more responsibility also in the cloud so that there the stuff is really done and the rules are programmed.
In this context, what would you advise to kind of sit and figure out it before outsourcing, in advance, how the processes, because I mean, you definitely take over processes where it's like not harmonized, decentralized, a lot of manual stuff. Do you advise it to do it in advance, or you take it over in whatever form and then shape it in your organization? And if it's the second one, and I think that would be then the biggest advantage of outsourcing also, that you take away this headache from the customer.
Let's phrase it like that. So you have a lot of customers we are working with. They are in a, let's say, a carve-out scenario. So they are going out with a unit of a few thousand people out of a bigger organization. And what you should normally do is to look into harmonizing your own processes, your tariff agreements. So you have a lot of that and make it simpler. You're coming out of a big company with all the big things you have, and you have to simplify for this size. For not 100,000, you are now 10,000. But there's normally no time to do so. You're taking over the complexity of a big monster and trying to make that alive after you take over the responsibility there. But normally you should have the time upfront to harmonize policies as well. But no one is doing it because they are all in a pressure.
But policy is only one of the things. I mean, you have time, travel, HR processes. I mean, it's not only policies.
Remember 12 years ago when we made this project with this Japanese company, where we were finding meal voucher providers in Israel, really because this policy was at the giving company. And normally what you said, that's crap. Why would you just give the people €50 more for a year and forget that process? But we, as a consultant, earned a ton of money in finding solutions for meal voucher for 20 people in Israel.
Let's put it differently. It costed the customer more money.
Yes.
Instead.
This project.
But I mean, you're right. I mean, I think the most costly things, I think, this kind of compliance, policy things, this is the precondition. But as soon as the policies are aligned, can you take over, for example, to your shared service centers, HR admin processes from 10 countries in a kind of very chaotic way and then structurize it yourself? I mean, do you need some kind of harmonized hiring, data management, or you say, okay, I take over if you use Workday or SuccessFactors and you implement it, that's enough for me, that's enough harmonization?
It's not, of course not. So the cloud solution doesn't bring the harmonization. So you have to be really bold enough to really push also this change through in the customer organization. And that is something which is underestimated by the customer, that this is a huge change. Customers are having to plan or have to plan really in such outsourcing or service provider changes. So if you have a company with also joint customer experience, we had with 15, 20, 45 different legal entities in US. And you were going there and taking over the responsibility for the services. It's super complex that you take over all these kingdom rules which are existing. And therefore you need a strong governance and also a strong project team, which is explaining the benefits in moving away all these old inheritages, so moving it out and following a new approach. But therefore you have to change also mindset change in these little entities. And that's a change management process, which can be huge. So we can send troops in, or you have a few people who really have done it 10 times, like you, and tell that is a new world. So it has to be very practically, because otherwise you're burning money like hell, because you can do then a project over 5 years, what you normally can do in 24 months, in 12 months, depending on the complexity and the country scope, for example. But that is really, therefore there's a need for people which are sitting on the customer side and explaining and taking the fear away what will happen. So you need someone who's strong and really pushing that opinion too, and holding the back of the responsible person at the customer, because they haven't done
operational people, in countries,
because they haven't done it before. They need that security at the end. It will be good, but it will be a painful process for everyone who's in such engagements.
Well, I mean, I think this is one of the topics I put on our list. I mean, the governance and strong project team on the customer side, in any case, but after go live, also strong governance.
Of course.
It will not work out alone simply, even if you outsource to such a big company like yours. So it still will not work out. You need to have governance which manages operations. And I think this understanding is often not there. And the reason is that, I mean, especially decentralized organizations, they had, like, for example, payroll in 15 countries, they had HR admin, and then implementing EC or Workday, outsourcing, you pull this responsibility centrally. And you need to have a strong team who manages that. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes why it doesn't work out. I mean, at least in my experience.